Hello everyone, I'm the Saxy Gamer. Today we're here for yet another Civilization 6 Leader Spotlight, where today we'll be taking a look at Pachacuti of the Inca. So before we get into things today, I would just like to announce that I have now become, yet again, partnered with YouTube in a way to have channel memberships now. So if you're not sure what channel memberships are, they're pretty much like Twitch subscriptions, except you get a little bit of extra benefits as well. So go ahead and check out the join button right below the video. I have had this up for a few days, I just haven't mentioned anything yet, and I probably will put out a standalone video just to kind of describe what it is further. But long story short, it is pretty much just a Twitch subscription, and it's just a way to support the channel should you so desire. You obviously don't have to, and it's really just up to you, but the option is there now if you are interested in that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start taking a look at Pachacuti of the Inca. So Pachacuti's first ability is known as Qhapaq Nan, and it makes it so that his domestic trade routes gain +1 food for every mountain tile in the origin city. In addition to this, he gains the Qhapaq Nan improvement when foreign trade civic is discovered. So we'll talk about that unique improvement in a little bit, but let's talk about the other part of that ability right now. So domestic trade routes gain +1 food for every mountain tile in the origin city. This situationally can be very strong. You can get some very, very tall cities by utilizing Qhapaq Nan, provided, of course, that you have a lot of mountains in your territory. And that's kind of the catch with Qhapaq Nan, is that if you don't have a lot of mountains in your territory, this ability is really not very good at all, because if you only have 1 or 2, then you're really not going to get very much benefit, and you'd probably rather just send those trade routes externally to get some gold or production or anything, because 1 or 2 extra food isn't that great. But if you are able to get good spawns, and the Inca do have a pretty heavy mountain spawn bias, and you have 7 or 8 mountains in your tiles, then you're going to get an incredibly high amount of food from Qhapaq Nan, and you're going to be able to grow those cities to insane population. One of the ways that I utilized this ability in a recent game that I played as the Inca was I went and I settled a city up in the tundra around a lot of mountains, so that way it had a lot of mountains in its territory, and although it was in the tundra and I couldn't build farms because I wasn't Canada, I was playing the Inca, I was still able to get a lot of food and get that city up to high population because I was able to get a trade route going to one of my other cities, and since I had a lot of mountain tiles in my borders, I got a lot of food from the trade route, and that was able to get the city growing a lot faster than it normally would have been in the tundra. So that is one of the ways that you can utilize this ability, is to make otherwise unlivable conditions livable, but once again, that is also reliant on the fact that you have to have mountains in those cities still. So Qhapaq Nan is definitely an ability that is situationally very good, but it's very dependent on terrain. Pachacuti's second ability is known as Mita, and it makes it so that citizens make work mountain tiles, and those mountain tiles will have a yield of +2 production, and they also will gain +1 food for every mountain tile that is adjacent to a terrace farm. So Mita is just something that, well, synergizes very well with Pachacuti, and it kind of works well and defines his playstyle in that if you have a lot of mountain tiles, then obviously Mita is going to be very good, and if you don't, it pretty much does nothing because you gain no benefit from it. But assuming that you do have a lot of mountain tiles in your territory, which hopefully you will if you're playing Pachacuti, Mita is actually a very strong ability just because of your ability to grow tall with Pachacuti. So a lot of Pachacuti's attributes make him able to grow tall because he can get a lot of food and thus grow his cities very big. And normally it would be a problem if you have a lot of mountain tiles, because normally mountain tiles would be dead tiles that provide no yields. But with Pachacuti, that's not the case because you're able to work your mountain tiles. So being able to get +2 production from every mountain tile that you work is really strong, because once your cities get to, 18 or 20 population, they still have a lot of extra tiles that they can work for a lot of extra production. So in the game that I played as Pachacuti on deity, I had, in my capital, I probably had, I don't even know, like more than 8 mountain tiles in the borders, and the city by the end of the game was probably size 22 or so. So normally in a game that would be bad because all those mountain tiles would have been dead and I would have got nothing from them. But as Pachacuti, I got a lot of food from them, I got a lot of production from them, and thus that city had insane production at the end of the game. So Mita is just something that works very well with the rest of Pachacuti's attributes because it allows you to continually grow tall, because you can get those other bonuses from the mountains while still being able to use the tiles themselves. So Mita, overall, it's not an outstanding ability, and once again, it is very dependent on terrain, but it is one that definitely synergizes well with the Incans' playstyle. Moving on to the Inca's unique unit, we have the Warak'aq, which is, it's still a funny name. I think I said it was a funny name whenever I did the first impressions video on the Inca, and I still definitely do think that. But it is a unique unit that replaces the Skirmisher. It has a melee strength of 20, a range strength of 40, which is up plus 10 from the Skirmisher, a movement of 3, an attack range of 1, and a production cost of 165, which is up plus 15 from the Skirmisher. The special ability of the Warak'aq is that it is able to attack twice in a turn, provided that it has enough movement points left to do so. So the Warak'aq is a unit that I'm kind of torn on, honestly. I want to like it, but I really just don't. Its melee strength is so low at 20 that if you get attacked by an enemy melee unit, you're probably going to get blown up very fast. One of the good things that you can use these for is actually for defense, since they get those 2 ranged attacks in one turn. That allows you to be able to kind of just melt through forces that are trying to attack you. The only problem is you have 1 attack range, so if you have ranged units that are attacking your city, you're unfortunately not going to be able to hit them with your Warak'aq, man. It's like a tongue twister every time I try to say that. The fact that it has 10 extra range strength than a Skirmisher is very nice. One of the other things that can be good on them is if you get to the, I believe it's a tier 3 promotion on the Scout class of units, it gives you plus 20 combat strength in all situations, which if you're able to get that, obviously that's going to be insane, because then you're going to have 40 melee strength and 60 range strength, which at the time of the Warak'aq is going to be ridiculous, because you'll have that unit with 2 attacks in a turn, so you can melt through things pretty fast. So if you're going to use the Warak'aq, I would advise that you probably should try to get a Scout leveled up, so that way you can get that promotion and then upgrade them into a Warak'aq. But other than that, I don't find this unit to be particularly useful. Pachacuti's unique tile improvement is known as the Terrace farm, and it is unlocked from the start of the game, at least I believe it is, I'm pretty sure it is, but it is a unique tile improvement that can be built on hill tiles. I believe it's all hill tiles except for tundra and snow hill tiles, and what it does is it provides plus 1 food and plus 0.5 housing. It will provide plus 0.5 food from each adjacent terrace farm once you get feudalism, and that rises to plus 1 with replaceable parts, and more importantly, it gets plus 1 food from each mountain. And keep in mind that because of one of the abilities of the Inca, it will also provide plus 1 food to each mountain that it is adjacent to. So the Terrace farm is a very, very strong tile improvement, and it's something that once again just synergizes very well and kind of defines the Incans' playstyle. So if you're able to get a lot of these out early, and once again, this is something else that's just kind of dependent on your spawn and your terrain, if you're able to get a lot of these out around mountains, then you're going to be able to get an insane amount of food. And I should probably also talk about the production that these give as well. So they will provide plus 2 production from each adjacent aqueduct and plus 1 production from being adjacent to fresh water if they're also not adjacent to an aqueduct. So you're either going to get plus 1 or plus 2. You're not going to get plus 3 in any case, because you can't have both of those production boosts at the same time. But anyways, as I was saying, these are really good, especially early on, because if you have a lot of mountains and you can nestle one of these into mountains, you can get a plus like 7 or 8 food tile very early on in the game, and you can have a population 8 city or so like within the first 20 turns if you're able to get a builder out very fast. I believe in the game that I had played, I was lucky enough to get a builder from a goodie hut, so then I was able to take that builder, put it right between 4 mountains, and get just an insane amount of food on that tile and grow my city to probably, I think, size 4 or 5 within, like 10 turns or something like that. So early on, these are very strong. They're still good throughout the rest of the game because they just allow you to keep growing taller and taller and taller, and then as you grow taller, you can work more of those mountain tiles to get production. The terrace farms can provide production, so I would definitely advise building aqueducts on the Inca if you're able to put them around your terrace farms, because getting plus 2 production pretty much means that they're going to function as both a farm and a mine on the same tile, which is something that pretty much nobody else in the game can do, so that is very good. So as far as my overall thoughts for the Terrace farm are concerned, I think that they're very strong. The only thing I don't like about them is the fact that you do have to trade off campus spots for Terrace farm spots. So just in general, you want to have campuses around a lot of mountains. So if you have one tile that's surrounded by, 5 mountain tiles, that would be an insane campus spot, but it also would be a very good terrace farm spot. So that is kind of a trade-off that you have to do when you're playing the Inca. You have to decide which is more important, getting those extra science yields or getting that additional food. So it is something that is a little bit tricky and something that you just kind of have to get used to whenever you're playing the Inca. The Inca have another unique tile improvement, and it is the Qhapaq Nan that we talked about a little bit earlier, and that is unlocked with foreign trade, as it said in the ability description. So all that the Qhapaq Nan is it's pretty much just a tunnel, that you unlock later in the game, except this one is unlocked earlier in the game. So it will allow units to move through mountains at the cost of 2 movement, and it pretty much just functions as a portal. So if you put one on one end of a mountain range and then you put another one on any point anywhere else in the mountain range, it doesn't even have to be a straight line away from it, then you'll be able to move straight through and teleport to that other point on the Qhapaq Nan for the cost of 2 movement. One of the other things to just mention is that I didn't realize this at first, but like any other units can move through these, including barbarians, so be careful that if you're going to build these, one of the things that you also can do is construct them outside of your territory. But if you're going to preemptively construct them outside your territory to, maybe like transport a settler or something, make sure that there aren't any barbarians on the other side, because they will walk through and then they will start pillaging stuff, so just be a little bit careful. But the Qhapaq Nan, there's not really much to be said about it. It's really just a tunnel that's unlocked earlier, so it gives you some nice movement options, and it is something that just kind of adds a little bit of fun to the Inca's playstyle, but I don't think it's particularly game-changing or, like insanely good or anything like that. It's just kind of a nice quality of life thing that the Inca have. And now let's go ahead and talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses of Pachacuti and the Incans in Civilization 6. So the one big strength of Pachacuti is that he is able to grow extremely tall. So normally in Civilization 6, tall is not a playstyle that is extremely viable because very few civs are able to get as high of a population as Pachacuti is, and additionally, as I mentioned before, a lot of other civs that get high population struggle to work tiles that are dead, such as, mountains or desert tiles or something like that. But Pachacuti is able to make use of pretty much all of that, and he's able to, mend all of the woes of all of the other civs that try to play tall. So he gets a ton of food to allow his cities to grow tall, and of course by grow tall I mean gain population, and then once he gains his population, he's able to work the mountain tiles, so that way he's able to get extra production. He can get additional food from his mountain tiles as well if he puts down terrace farms, and it all just kind of works together to allow his cities to grow to be extremely big cities with huge population counts, able to work a lot of tiles, and able to get a ton of production from them. So that is easily the biggest strength of Pachacuti, is just his ability to have, maybe a smaller empire land-wise, but just have huge, enormous cities that have a ton of people in them, and that can get really high yields. As far as his weaknesses are concerned, though, one of the biggest things that makes him a little bit weak is that he's not directly geared towards a specific victory type. So sure, he gets some food and some production, but food alone is not going to push you towards any particular victory. You're going to need, obviously, something else, like a particular yield, such as science, or culture, or faith, or diplomatic points, or diplomatic favor is what it's called. I don't know why I called it diplomatic points. And Pachacuti doesn't really get any of that. All that he gets is food, and I guess production is good for science victory, but not much else outside of that. So that is one of his big weaknesses, is that once you get that food, you kind of have to formulate what you're going to do with it to make you strong towards a particular victory, and that is something that just makes him a little bit more difficult than some of the other civs in the game. One of the other super big weaknesses with Pachacuti is that he is extremely terrain reliant. So if you're playing Pachacuti and you don't have a lot of mountains, he's just an absolutely terrible civ. He pretty much gets nothing if he doesn't have a lot of mountains. Thankfully for him, he does have a pretty strong mountain start bias, but if you're not on a continent split, so now how mountain generation works in Civ 6 is that along the edges of continents where continents meet, you generally tend to get a lot of mountain ranges, just because, that's what happens in the real world. So if you're not lucky and you don't spawn on one of those continent splits, or there's not one anywhere near you and you don't have a lot of mountains, Pachacuti is very bad, because he doesn't get very much from, well, really anything that he has, because pretty much everything he has is reliant on him having those mountain tiles. So if you don't have those, you are unfortunately out of luck with Pachacuti. And now it is time to give Pachacuti his tier ranking. So if you're new to the series, what I do is I give each civilization a tier ranking in each of the 5 victory types now. I said 4 last time, but now I remember there are 5. So domination, science, culture, religion, and diplomacy. And I give them an overall rating as well that just judges how versatile they are, and just kind of generally how good the civilization is. And this takes into account more things than just how good they are at each particular victory type. All of our rankings go from S to F, with S being the highest and F being terrible. So without further ado, let's go ahead and rank Pachacuti. So domination's up first, and I think that Pachacuti deserves a C. Domination is kind of possible on him, but not really. He doesn't have really very many reasons to go for it, because you would much rather play tall than wide with Pachacuti, just because of how all of his things set him up. I almost gave him a D in this just because of that reason, that you would rather play tall than wide. But really, it is still kind of an option to, play wide and go domination. But you might run into some issues, because if you have a lot of cities that are high population, you're going to run into some amenity issues very fast. So for that reason, I wouldn't necessarily advise going domination on Pachacuti, and thus I think that he deserves the C. Science is up next, and I definitely think that Pachacuti deserves an A in science for multiple reasons. The big one is just because of how well science victory generally tends to favor mountain regions, because whenever you have a lot of mountain ranges, then you can get a lot of campus district adjacencies. So the fact that Pachacuti has such a strong mountain spawn bias makes him very good for science victories, because you can get all those really good campus spots, get down some high yield campuses, you can double them with the policy card, the adjacency bonuses, and then you can just have a ton of science per turn. The one game that I have played and won as Pachacuti on Deity was a science game, and I didn't struggle very much at all to keep up with the Deity AI in science yield, so it kind of spoke to me as to actually how good he was in science. The other really good thing is that since you are able to grow tall, you're able to work a lot of tiles and thus have high production, which makes it so that you're able to build those space parts like very, very fast. The fact that you can work the mountain tiles just helps that even more, and I believe that most of my space parts I was able to construct in like less than 10 turns, so that just kind of speaks as to how much production you can get in Pachacuti's Civ. So all of those things work very well towards science victory, and thus I think he deserves the A. Culture is up next, and I think he deserves a C. Once again, it's just kind of an issue of playing tall versus wide. If you're going to play Culture Victory, you should probably play wide, because you need to have a lot of cities to have theater squares to get great works, and you need a lot of land to make national parks and seaside resorts. And if you're going to play Pachacuti, chances are you're probably not going to have that much land in that many cities. Just once again, because you're kind of going to want to play tall instead, because if you don't play tall as Pachacuti, you're kind of throwing away a lot of his strengths, and you're really not going with how he's intended to be played. So for that reason, I think he deserves the C. You can get some good national park spots just because of how many mountains you'll probably have, but at the same time, if you're going to have national parks with mountains, you have to make sure that you don't have tile improvements on those tiles, which is something that which would then mean that you're forfeiting your terrace farms, which is something that you don't really want to do. So for that reason, I think he deserves a C. Religion is up next, and I think that he deserves a B in religion. Once again, just because kind of the correlation between mountains and religion, because you get those holy site adjacency bonuses from mountains. So if you have a lot of mountain tiles, generally you can get some pretty good holy site adjacency bonuses. And the other thing is, religious victory doesn't really matter how big your empire is. As long as you're able to spread your religion to other people, then you're going to be fine with religious victory. So the fact that you can play tall on Pachacuti doesn't really hurt religious victory at all. So for that reason, I think that he deserves the B. Diplomacy is up next, and I think that he deserves a C. He doesn't really have anything going for him for diplomacy. He's not a terrible diplomatic civ, because you generally aren't going to be too much of a jerk on him, so people will like you enough that you can get quite a few alliances and generate some diplomatic favor from them. But aside from that, there's not really anything that makes him special in diplomacy, so I think he deserves the C. And for his overall rating, I definitely think that he deserves a solid B. Once again, I say that I don't give pluses and minuses, but if I gave a B+, he would be a B+. He is situationally a very strong civ. He can grow very tall, he can utilize a lot of tiles, get a lot of production, and if he has mountains, then he can get some really good district adjacency bonuses. The problems with him are that, as I mentioned, he's not pointed towards a specific victory on his own, and the other thing is, if you don't get a lot of mountains, then he's really not a good civ. So he is extremely terrain reliant, and if you don't have that terrain that he needs, he's not very good. So just because of that inconsistency, I think that he kind of falls down from A tier into B tier, and that's why I gave him the B rating. Nonetheless, though, he is definitely a very good civ, and if you're playing single player and you just want to re-roll until you see some nice mountains, I would highly advise that you do that, because you'll have a much better time playing him, but just because of that inconsistency, I think he deserves the B. So thank you everyone for watching. I've been the Saxy Gamer. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you're looking for more Civilization 6 content, feel free to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.